It's nice to be back at ALPS. It was one of my favourite conferences. So I'm going to talk a little bit about today about what we do. For those of you who haven't heard of scrazzl, it's a startup I founded about 4 years ago. Just out of my PhD, I was working as a laboratory scientist for about 8 years before that. And one of the problems that I was really interested in addressing was this idea of trying to optimize experiments in the most efficient way and make sure that you reduce experimental failure in a laboratory. Anyone who's worked as a biologist will know, you use pretty much anything. The reagents that you use are commercially available now. You buy them in as kits, or you buy them in as commercially available components. But establishing getting an unbiased qualitative assessment of reagents is a real challenge. There's no TripAdvisor type experience. So really kind of trying to just determine, which reagent is the correct one, what are the optimal parameters to use and operate and plan your experiments is difficult. And what scientists generally rely on is the publication record. They will trawl through countless numbers of papers to look at the types of protocols that people have, or types of experiments people have run before they're similar, and they'll optimize their experiments based on that prior knowledge of their peers. So we got thinking at the time, how can we, and if you want to do this, if you want to leverage the collective knowledge that's contained within material section, it's actually quite a cumbersome process right now. As a scientist, you have to read a lot of papers, you have to document them by hand, and part of that challenge is it's not readily accessible qualitative data. You have to aggregate it and aggregate it yourself and then evaluate it. So what we set out to do with scrazzl really was to try and find more efficient ways to gather that information and put some structure on it so that it can be used as a kind of a qualitative measure. And some of the vendors out there that are doing a good job on this in this space, they invest a lot of time in actually pulling this information together for their customers. So this is a screenshot of the ABCAM website, who do a really good job of actually accumulating data around each of their products. So they sell mainly antibodies. They pull all the references together that have used or mentioned that antibody. They look at the dilutions that it's been used at. They look at the specific applications. They look at the tissue types, the matrix information. But a lot of vendors don't really do this. And certainly this is something that ABCAM do in isolation. It's not done in a systematic way. So core to what we do is trying to approach this problem in a systematic way, bring this information together systematically so that it can be exploited for a specific use case to answer a specific question. And I would argue really that the opportunity for publishers such as yourself, it isn't necessarily a big data challenge that you have, because in the world of big data, the articles you produce, it's an order of magnitude smaller than, say, a Twitter stream or Twitter feed or Google searches. The challenge that you have is, and the value is actually contained within the content. It's unstructured content, and Eric touched on that, structured versus unstructured. The problem with unstructured content is machines don't really like it. They can't read it. They can't make sense of it. It requires humans to do that. So to take what machines like to see is a frame of reference. They like to see things in tables that is annotated so that they can you can throw computational power at this structured data and start to pull interesting new insights out of it and make and monetize it in some way and deliver value. And the great thing about this, and some of the companies that are really driving in the big data space, it's not that the data is complex, it's just there's lots of it, and they can just throw lots of computational power at it and more data, and they get more insights. This is a picture of my basis, which is actually an antique as of Tuesday. But this is a good example of how big data is starting to touch our lifestyle. We all wear, I'm sure lots of people in the audience are wearing wearable tech devices. But these types of devices gather structured data. This measures my pulse, it measures my skin temperature, it measures my activity in a day, but it's all well-structured data, and if BASIS can analyze that data at scale from lots of different people and derive insights out of that. Similarly, in biology, just a little over 10 years ago, the first genome was sequenced, and at the time that was an enormous challenge for biology, but genetic information isn't unstructured. It's a code. It's structured information. So solving as we've moved from a single genome to where we're now poised to sequence, where individuals will be sequenced multiple times in their life as they present with different types of cancers, tumors may be sequenced. Again, this is structured information, and you can start to just apply more computational power to it and derive insights from that. However, when you get into unstructured data, this is where it's very difficult to just throw raw computational power at problems and derive insight. And the content that's produced by publishers is written. It's human language. It's interpretations. And just throwing computational power at that type of information, it isn't very easy to derive meaningful insights from that type of information. And to actually start to ask interesting questions, you have to partially structure it. And over the past number of years, XML, for example, has evolved. That's a partial structure. That's just partially structuring an article in a way that makes it easier for a machine to actually interact with it. But I would argue that there's a need for us to go even further and start to look at not just the sections of articles, but the paper, the content within the articles. And of course, semantic was bandied about for many years as a dawn and a new opportunity, but semantically enabling content requires that somebody actually says this is an object and this is how it relates to other objects. So it still requires human intervention, and the value that's in content, I guess, is the retrospective value. It's the 300 years of data that's been accumulated, the sum of human knowledge. How do you start to make sense of that, all of that unstructured content? So I wanted to maybe look at some examples of businesses and projects that are trying to tackle this unstructured problem and drive new insights out of actually addressing it. And a good example that came to my attention a couple of months ago, actually around the time that the Malaysian Airways flight crashed, Tomnod launched a campaign to crowdsource analysis of satellite imagery, and they asked people to identify objects within the satellite. So they have all of this satellite imagery that a machine can't read. It doesn't understand what it's looking at. And what Tomnod does is it gets humans to partially structure the imagery so that a machine can start to make sense of it. Similarly, Galaxy Zoo, it's a really great project here in the UK. Computers can't recognize Galaxy configurations. They just don't recognize them and they can't classify them. So it requires a human to partially structure it so that a machine can start to ask more interesting questions about it. So this brings me back to what we do. We have a very discrete question. Our mission as a company is to try and help scientists make better, more informed decisions about the materials they use in their research and the protocols that they use to run their experiments. And that information is in content. It's just written by humans and very hard to aggregate in any meaningful way. So what we focus on is taking unstructured content in the material section, identifying the resources, so the products within those, or the material resources within the content, and then identifying them. And actually, in terms of scale, just in PubMed, if you look at the articles that are in PubMed, there's about 380 million different products are sitting on content, sitting in the content within the PubMed database. So when we started this process, we were asking ourselves, how can we turn 380 million unstructured resource matches into actionable data that can answer very discrete questions for scientists? And there's a couple of considerations. There was a couple of considerations for us as a business to actually address this. One is you need to have the product data. You need to have a database, a structured database of all the reagents and products that are out there, which luckily we did. We deal with a lot of the vendors in the community. We've got a well-structured, categorized product database that allows us to that we can use and plug into. The next thing you have to do is automate as much as you can. If you're looking at 380 matches, you need to really figure out a process that cuts as much human intervention out so that it can scale. So where we can automate, we do. If we've got a catalog, if we can find a catalog and a catalog number in a sentence, or a unique identifier that refers to a product or a resource, a machine will find that for us. The next thing that we had to do was where we couldn't find a unique identifier or a catalog number match, we had to make it as fast as possible for a human to make an association. So this is an image of our curation workflow. It feeds in all of the content that we can lay our hands on. It breaks it all out into sentences, and it finds the vendor name or a vendor synonym, and then we will ask a human to say, yes, this is this product, yes, or no, or they'll cycle through each of the sentences and tie them very quickly. So in terms of scale, we can make an association and tie the metadata that's also contained within the sentence. So what was the matrix, what was the dilution, what was the reactivity, all that information can be appended to that record, and we can process about 500 matches an hour, which is if you were to do this manually, if you were to imagine how you'd go about this, tying this information together in a manual process, this is a quantum leap in terms of human intervention. Finally, the last thing that we do is we've built a centralized cloud-based system for curation. I showed a screenshot of how ABCAM put this information in front of their customers so that they can make better decisions about ABCAM products. We have a whole variety of vendors who are using this centralized system to also curate their records. So we have the data, we have the speed of curation, and now we have a crowdsourced population who have a vested interest in actually making these associations and tying this information together. This is one of the ways we're using it. We're tying citations directly to product records. Where the real opportunity is for us going forward, I think, is going to be through releasing this structured information that we've derived from unstructured content through APIs. So this allows you to do things like, I want to use a specific antibody. Tell me what the most successful dilution has been across the scientific community. If you were to try and answer that question right now, it would take you weeks of reading papers. So these types of insights start to become possible when you've partially structured the data in this way. It also allows things like semantic enablement of content, so we know where in a sentence a resource match lies, so you can start to drop hyperlinks onto pages in interesting ways. It also offers an opportunity for publishers to think about categorization of their articles in new ways. So think about what we've done. We've added structured product information and tied it to a sentence where a product has been mentioned. We can categorize that product information in lots of different ways. So you can reconfigure it. You can reconfigure your article categorization. You can start to cluster articles based on the types of materials that the scientists have used and reported within those articles. So it creates this whole new way of looking at research content that is beyond just the typical show me papers for, hypoxia. It's far more in-depth, far more granular, far more meaningful. From an ad, for any publishers that are operating an ad-supported model, we can get you to a level of granularity that's not currently possible. So instead of saying, like this example, it's a device. It's not based on anything that the reader is particularly interested in. It's just an ad that's been rendered. We can say, okay, here's the collection of products that are in this article now. This is the ad you should probably place here that's going to be meaningful for your audience, because it's either an equivalent product from a competing vendor or it's an upgraded version of the same product. So again, the type of data that starts to make drive improvements in yield and performance of advertising. So that's kind of a practical application, I suppose, of what some of the stuff that Eric has been talking about in terms of structured and unstructured data. I'm delighted to take any questions afterwards, or I'm going to be here this evening, so would love to discuss opportunities more. I'm going to leave it there, and thank you very much.